Hello all, welcome to eLagaan Whiteboard Friday. So today we are going to discuss about due diligence of legal agreements and contracts. So what exactly encompasses legal agreements and contracts? Essentially, in a broad nutshell, it can be said that there could be various agreements with each of the stakeholders in the company. The major stakeholders of the company are the shareholders and the investors, B, the founders, then C, the banks and loans and stuff. If you have any contacts with bank, any transactions happening with any of these financial institutions. Then fourth is your suppliers and the customers, and fifth are your employees and the contractors and freelancers. So basically, there are several agreements that would happen. Like for example, let's take stakeholder by stakeholder. So in the first, like with the investors and the founders, there would be a founders agreement with the founders, and then there could be also an arrangement which is called like co-founders agreement between the founders, and then with the investors there would be shareholders agreement and share subscription agreements, and even there could be any other arrangements between the investor and the company. The third would be basically with banks. In case if you've opted for any term loans or anything, then there would be loan agreements that would be there. And then the fourth with the suppliers and the customers would be essentially all your service agreements or contract for supply agreements, or with the customer it would be like your sale of service agreements. And the fifth would be the employees, and these form the most critical. So in any due diligence they would see what kind of arrangement do you have with your key employees. In whatever age of AI we are, ultimately it depends on every company depends on the key employees. So as a when a due diligence happens, so the team would be more interested in knowing whether they what are the arrangements with the key employees, and there would be key employee agreements that would help them ascertain whether there are any arrangements which would retain them for longer period of time, or are there any gaps in that and stuff. And then with employees, regular employees, we would have all the offer letters and employment agreements with them, and intellectual property at NDAs, and also invention contract on invention basically. So these are the critical documents that every due diligence team would require to check if there are any legal or contract issues. And one would be also the last one would be the contracts with the advisors, mentors, and stuff. So in lot of cases when the startups, it's very common to have advisors on board, and there would be some contracts with them. So it is very important for investor to know if there are any terms in these agreements which wherein we have promised certain, let's say certain percentage of shares or something in return for this service. So it would also have an impact on their decision making. So these are the kind of agreements that normally the due diligence team asks for their verification. Now, what is the importance? And needless to say, it's of paramount importance, because if there are any clauses in these agreements which can actually hamper the growth of the company, which can have impact on the company. For example, let's say a vendor agreement with a customer agreement with one of the top customers could have a condition that if there is any change on the shareholding, you have to inform them prior before going a shareholding change. It could be because of various reasons, like they might not want a shareholder who is their competitor to be on board. So such things can always hamper your due diligence process, and also in extreme cases it can also be it would require prior approvals from them to go ahead with such investment process. So it is of paramount importance that legal documents are clean, and you as a founder, you will have to always ensure that we do not sign any agreement in a jiffy and not see what are the clauses written in it. And this is a common practice. We do not see, a lot of times we say these are standard agreements. We are dealing with a big vendor, let's say Google. We cannot negotiate our terms with them. They have a standard policy. While it may be true to an extent, but if there are certain clauses which would actually, you think, would hamper your company's growth and stuff, then you always have room for negotiation. There's no way that one can impose all the terms and conditions on you. So hence it's very important, and this is the entire scope of the due diligence of legal documents and contracts. So the fourth thing would be like what are the key requirements, as I have already mentioned. Basically, all the legal documents that you have, the contracts, the offer letters, and any kinds of arrangement, whether written, oral, or even if it's on an email, it need not be only in black and white. Even if it's on email, it's still counted as an arrangement. So all these documents would have to be given to your to the due diligence team for them to carry out their work. And another important thing to note would be all these agreements would be required right from inception till date. So, in our experience, we've noticed, for example, let's say you've not renewed your rent agreement, but you continue to enjoy the premises. So, this is quite common that after a year you do not renew your agreement and you still continue to use the premises. So that in due diligence, it comes up as a point, and again it affects the speed of the process. So it is always advisable, though some things go without saying, and there could be an arrangement between you and the vendor or between you and different people, but it's always advisable that it should be on a contract, to be clear. And the last thing is the tips. So, what are the tips? Like the one tip is, as I already said, just ensure there's everything on the contract, and try to have all the contracts in place. Even if you have let's say a customer with whom your business would be only probably few thousands, but just ensure you have a customer, because you have an agreement with them, because it adds value to your company, saying that okay, we have such a customer base. And also with the employees, it's of utmost importance that you have an NDA signed with them, also an agreement on the inventions, like all the inventions done by him during the time he is employed with the company would be with the ownership of the company only. This is also of utmost important. And the third thing would be also to have an agreement with the founders and the key employees to ensure that we retain them at least for a period of time where company is out of its initial stages, so that the product is there, and at least during those time you have the key employees in the office, in the company at least. So you have to ensure there are agreements in place to control that. And the second tip would be to maintain a complete log of the contracts that a company enters into. Again, this is not a common practice with startups, and they tend to just sign an agreement, and some agreements are in email, some agreements are in Dropbox, some agreements are in hard copy. And what happens is, whenever any regulatory authorities or for even due diligence, when anyone asks for these agreements, there's no one set, one folder where all the documents are readily available, or one log which would say, okay, these are all the agreements that have been entered into by the company. What happens is, if you tend to lose out certain agreements, and it may have a clause which might have affect your transaction, and if you miss out sharing that with the team, it would it would obviously amount to not disclosing material information. Second, it could also hamper the future of the company. So it is always advisable to maintain a log. It might consume a bit of time, but it's always a good practice. So thank you guys. That's all for today. If you have any questions, drop us your queries on hello@eLagaan.com, and do check out our website for open source agreements.